videotaping. Also, Fred, let you in. 3, 2, and 1. Hey, welcome everybody. Pete Caliendo, Baseball Outside the Box. Thanks for joining us live on Facebook, Zoom, and Twitter. We really appreciate it. We're here in Chicago studios, and this will be a great, great show. We're going to have a gentleman on who is one of the best in the business, man. When I put this up, everybody wanted to join the show. It's incredible. He is the director of player development for the Seattle Mariners. He's also with Team USA. He's a successful college coach, and he is a sports psychologist. Now, I got to tell you, it's interesting, and I was reading, he was hired by Jerry DiPoto. Jerry never met him. They had a 5-hour meeting. I'm sure I would have loved to have been a fly on that wall. But again, this is going to be a great, great interview, and we want to welcome everybody. We're letting in a couple more, and we will get rocking and rolling. Let me welcome our good friend to the show for the very first time. I can't believe it. I failed. I tried to get him, but this is, he's so busy. Very first time on Baseball Outside the Box, Andy McKay. Andy, how you doing, man? Can you hear me?
I'm doing great, and I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you now.
Are we okay?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Go ahead, say a couple things, and then
no, this is great, and I appreciate you having me on. I'm a fan of the show, and I do want to correct you. You said I'm a sports psychologist, and I got to make sure that we don't give anybody that impression. I work in the mental skills arena, but I don't have those type of credentials, and I don't want to mislead anybody.
No, absolutely. And again, that's my fault. And I was reading it. I thought I read it, so that's just my.
Well, it's been out. I get introduced a lot like that, and it's I don't want to try to mislead anybody, and I don't want people.
Absolutely.
I don't want people thinking that I'm trying to be a doctor when I'm not. But obviously, I've got a passion for the mental side of the game, and I've worked at it. I've taught it at the college level, and I've incorporated it into everything I've done as a coach. So I do feel qualified to speak on it, but I just wanted to kind of make sure we were set on that particular point.
Absolutely. And here's a great way to start too. We talk about, I was reading, it says you call it the next frontier, conquering the mind. And I know that analytics was big, and Jerry DiPoto was big on that, but then he started figuring out, that a lot of teams have analytics, and some are real good at it. Some are okay. Everybody's different, but the new frontier is really the mental game. So we're really talking about the brain, understanding the brain, because we've had a couple series on this when it comes to understanding the brain, the new frontier, I guess you call it. Can you go elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. And, it's been an ongoing study for a lot of people. It's becoming fairly mainstream in professional baseball right now, but it's still far more of an art than a science. And there's and nobody really has this figured out. But where we've made huge strides is just in the acceptance on the part of staff and players and organizations that you've got these teams put together. You've got millions and millions of dollars in payroll, and everybody's very quick to acknowledge now that it's all kind of held hostage by that player's frame of mind in that particular moment. And so the analysts are critical. I mean, we use our analysts in Seattle as well as anybody, I believe. Jerry's trying to put together a roster. Scott Service is trying to manage the team, but at the end of the day, you have a pitcher on the mound with a ball in his hand. He's got to make a pitch, or you got a hitter in the batter's box, or a defender getting ready to make a play. And their performance is totally hinging on where they're at mentally in that particular moment in time. And so all of the work you put in, and just as a player, whether it's working on your swing or developing pitches or the weight room, the training room, the diet, all of these things, they only really get to show up if mentally you are where you need to be in that moment in time.
We go back. Ken, rest in peace, Ken Revisa. I know you know him well. We got a chance to know him pretty good and travel with him. Ken, I remember talking about 40 years ago, whatever it was, when he got started, boy, it was taboo. It's been a long time. How far has that come? What are some of the changes that's in the mental game as far as teaching it?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought up Ken. Obviously, Ken was my mentor. Ken was somebody who took me under his wing at a very young age when he certainly didn't have to. And kind of along with Harvey Dorfman, he was really the pioneer. So he really went through the dark ages of, no one having any idea what he was even talking about or why he was there. And he didn't really understand baseball when he started. He was a gymnast, and at Cal State Fullerton, and Augie Garrido kind of got him into baseball with the Fullerton baseball teams, and that morphed into the Angels. But I would say it's progressed in every format, because really what you've got, rather than just really a very small select handful of people doing it, now you have hundreds of people contributing to the discipline and figuring out better ways to simplify things, understanding what it really takes to let your training take over and do the work for you. Learning how to present to athletes better in ways that they can digest it better. And so I would say every fashion of mental skills has improved greatly over the years. And you've got, all of the military now is highly involved with mental training, from, everybody wants to talk about the Navy SEALs, but all aspects of our military are being trained in, police officers, firefighters, air traffic controllers. So mental health, just not just in baseball in terms of performance and competing, has taken off in terms of the importance that people are putting on it at all levels. I mean, you're probably not going to find a CEO of a top company that does not have some form of a life coach, some form of a somebody trying to help them with emotional awareness and so forth. So it's come a long ways.
Especially during this time, probably another area to discuss before we really get into more. During this time, downtimes, players, the mental training, I know it never stops, right? I mean, it's in practice, it's in the off season, it's during the season. We're like right now, what can some players be doing or coaches be doing to help players with the mental game in a down period like this?
Yeah, well, hopefully it's one of those things that as an instructor, you need to be able to really put your philosophy together, just like a hitting coach would or a pitching coach would, and to begin to understand, like, this is my curriculum, this is what I'm teaching, and what does mental skills really mean for the Seattle Mariners? What does it mean for an individual player? And just like a hitting coach or a pitching coach, you've got this foundation that you work off of, but then you have to individualize it for everybody. And so it would be kind of impossible for me to tell you, hey, this is what everybody should be doing.
Adia, how are you?
Hi,
Adia, how are you?
Hang on, mute your mics, guys. Hang on, I'll get them.
It's definitely an opportunity right now for players to begin to explore this part of their game. And, I was just over the last probably 4 days, I kind of devoured the new Roy Halladay book.
Oh, yeah.
And if there was anybody out there that wasn't really clear on how important this is, pick up that book and look at the turnaround in Roy's career early on. Most people don't understand, Roy Halladay still owns a major league record for the highest ERA of any pitcher who threw 50 innings or more in a major league season. And he did that and then got sent all the way to Single A, where he met Harvey Dorfman. And then really put together, he's probably the best pitcher in baseball for about a 10 or 11 year period there. So there's opportunities everywhere. There's so many books out there now. There's so many podcasts out there. But it's really understanding of how do I use my mind to help me focus on the right thing at the right time, and to be able to manage all the thoughts that go into some type of live performance. And it's very similar to what you do. Once you start a show like this, you understand what it's like to things start moving pretty quickly in your head. And you also know,
especially when you got to do the lighting, director, you're taping.
Exactly. And there's so many disciplines that are now coming together, and you're seeing where, whether it's in the military, whether it's a musician putting on a live show, athletes from every sport. There's not a golfer that doesn't work with a mental skills coach on the tour. And so what everyone's seeing now is that the the similarities are endless, and that live performance comes down to your ability to stay focused and not get distracted by really all the different things that are going on inside your head. And so there's really no excuse any longer because the information is everywhere, and the opportunity to get better in this area is everywhere right now.
Would you say, because you brought up golf, and I read a couple of things that you talked about in golf, would you say that that would be one of the sports that takes the most mental training, and we can learn from the golfers?
You can, and golf tends to always be ahead of everybody else, and I'm not really sure why, but whether it's video or TrackMan and radar analysis of your swing and ball flight to mental skills, golf always seems to be ahead. So is tennis. And what makes golf such an interesting sport is that you're playing a 4-hour golf match, and it takes you about 12 minutes to actually play it. So that leaves you like 3 hours and 50 minutes to think. Yeah. And you better really work on how you're going to think. And everybody who's ever golfed understands what I'm talking about. So I would say the golf is really challenging, but any of the sports that have these large durations of time in between, and baseball has it. Baseball is a little bit different than golf because golf, you're competing against the ball in the course. Baseball, you're competing against another competitor, but you still have this space in between where the mental game lives. And that's really important. But it's funny, you brought up the most challenging for me would be NASCAR racing. And I think that if you were to put yourself in one of those cars and understand how fast they're going, and they've got they're inches apart, they're boxed in, going that fast for that long. That is a mental grind that I don't think can be replicated in any other sport.
Yeah, and when we talk about the word focus, I think you used a couple of different terms, but when you talk about the word focus, talk about focus in NASCAR. I mean, if you lose your focus there, you lose your life.
You lose your life. And again, so that's where you can learn a lot from them, just like Blue Angel pilots. These guys are flying at times, 550, 600 miles an hour, 13 inches apart, wing to wing. And, when they do these maneuvers, again, the price of making a mistake and losing focus is you kill yourself and others. That's the reality of NASCAR. Baseball doesn't quite have that consequence to it, but it doesn't mean that you can't learn from how those guys prepare themselves to go out and think the right way and focus the right way and apply it to baseball.
Just because we were on golf, Jen asked on Zoom about the the golfers. I even wanted to mention, should we all be golfing? I mean, when we're young, if we take up golf, and we're playing baseball at the same time, will that help us from a mental standpoint?
I think there's all kinds of things that can help you. And again, anything that requires you to have a heightened level of focus, to be so committed to the moment that everything else gets drowned out, is going to benefit you. And that's why there's so many opportunities like off of the field. Again, just like what we're doing right now, it's helping me focus, and everything else disappears. I'm not worried about what's going on tonight or what happened this morning. I'm consumed with what's going on right now. And so I would absolutely agree that playing multiple sports, doing things that challenges you to think, and somewhat be in control of what's going on up here can only help.
We were talking about, different guys. Everybody's different. We're training players differently now than we used in the past. In the past, it was all, we did everything the same. So you fielded the same, you hit the same, you taught it all the same. The mental part's different. What's just a couple examples of how you would work with a couple different players differently on the mental game?
Yeah. Well, you got to understand, number one, and this is why everything is so individualized. you have a pitcher, and I'm just going to make up a couple names that everybody would probably understand, like a Max Scherzer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I don't know Max, so this is all hypothetical. I'm just watching him pitch. But he pitches off of a ton of emotion. Okay, like when he stands on the mound, there's that emotional, and I don't know what it is. It could be anger, it could be intensity, but whatever it is, it's very visible. Okay, it's not right and it's not wrong. That's who he is as a person, and that's how he competes. Okay, and then you could go to another example of, make up a name, a Greg Maddox. A little bit calmer, a little bit quieter, a little bit more cerebral. Now, there is no right or wrong. It's what makes this person focus better. Some people focus better out of just pure joy and fun. An Adrian Beltre, for example, looked like he was just playing wiffle ball all the time in his backyard, having a blast. But that allowed him to focus better. Okay. I don't think if Scherzer tried to relax and have a good time, he would pitch the way he pitches.
Wow.
And so you have to get to know the person a little bit. And then you also have to understand their ability to transition, because you also have players that are totally different when they walk on the field than they are off the field. And they literally, we'll call it putting on a mask. They'll put on a mask and go do their job. And then the job's over, they take the mask off. And so you just have to really get to know people. You have to understand the sports that are different. For example, playing football, however many times they play in the NFL, 16, 17 Sundays in a row, you can get yourself into this heightened state of emotional readiness once a week. That's totally different than trying to do it every night. And starting pitchers who only have to do it once every 5 days is different than a shortstop who has to do it, sometimes 14 nights in a row before he gets a day off. So all of these factors come in to help you understand not only the person, but also the environment and, what is their belief system. If you've got player A who is trying to go to the Hall of Fame, and you've got player B who's just trying to make some money, and you got player C who just wants to spend a day in the big leagues and say he played in the big leagues, those are three different people. None of them are right, none of them are wrong. But you have to understand their belief system. You have to understand their perspective on the game and on life. And you also have to understand what thoughts and emotions help them focus better than others. And until you do that, you just can't, there is no cookie cutter, one size fits all here. They're all very unique. And I would say one of the biggest challenges, especially at the professional level, is understanding that they're still human beings. And that you may see them as being one of the best in the world at what they do, and they are, okay, but they're still very fragile people at times, and they have real emotions, and they got real lives away from the field that can impact performance. And so all of these things have to be understood and recognized, before you can start really trying to help.
I could see how you related that to the CEOs of companies or managers of businesses, knowing their employees. I mean, if you can really get in their minds and understand them all, the job just becomes a lot easier. Now, question, I've traveled the world. I've been very lucky. I've seen all the top national teams. I've been in their dugouts. I've been in their clubhouses. The Cubans are always so relaxed and just before a ball game. You go to the USA team and they're like stiff as a board. I mean, there's quiet, it's silent, nobody, there's different ways. Are we really, is it really just allowing the player to be himself so everybody can be individually? Somebody's quiet, somebody's not. How do you guys handle that?
You have to be yourself, and you can't fake it, and you can't really force somebody to be somebody they're not. And, as you're talking, I've experienced it too with international tournaments. You see, it's very different from just culture to culture at times.
Yeah.
And then you've got differences within cultures, and you have to honor that. So again, to compete at your best, you have to play off of your authentic self. And you got very cold, calculated type of athletes. Great. You got guys that are borderline rage and angry, and they're able to do that for 3 hours a night and then turn it back off. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, people always say there's no fear. That's not right. Fear is a good motivator for some. You know, you got just pure joy and passion. You got the Dustin Pedroia who's got the massive chip on his shoulder, and he's going to prove the world wrong every night. You know, there is no right or wrong. It's just understanding that individual person and then letting him be himself. And it's really tough because when you think about this, one of the hardest pieces of mental skills is that we're all chasing confidence. Confidence is everything. Okay. And the reality is that confidence is not a real likable trait in a lot of people. And so it gets coached out of them. It gets beaten out of them, literally by the industry, when in fact it's the most valuable thing you can possibly have. And so the trick is, and as athletes get older and maybe they mature a little bit, they learn how to turn it on a little bit and turn it off a little bit. But, you know, standing on a mound and having to have the courage and the confidence to go attack a major league hitter, that mindset can get you in a lot of trouble off the field. And so it's learning time and place, and those things take some time as well.
Well, you talk about fear. Yeah. I mean, I have fear every time before I come on the show. I'm always nervous. You know, I've done a ton of them, but I'm always trying to prepare so I'm not as nervous. You know, but one of the things that, go ahead.
But the nerves are great. And, you know, I tell people this all the time and they laugh. I'll tell them, you know, I spend more time helping people get butterflies than get rid of butterflies.
Huh.
Because the butterflies just tell you that something is exciting, that you're prepared, that you're passionate, and that you're about to get an opportunity to do something pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like you get butterflies on a first date. You get butterflies when you're going to try to kiss a girl. You get butterflies on Christmas Eve. Okay. You know, Will Chamberlain talked about vomiting almost every night before he played. And when he didn't have that feeling, he usually didn't play well. And so it's also about how do I get the butterflies? Everybody gets butterflies in the playoffs. Everybody gets butterflies on opening day. You got to get butterflies in June and July, you know, because that's when these things are won. And it's hard. It's a real challenge because of the grind of a professional schedule can just make you numb because it's just one after the other.
You know, we're going to get the questions, everybody. I appreciate it. We got a few already. You know, the majority of the game is really, you know, dealing with the failure. And, you know, somebody fails and they deal with it differently.
Yeah.
So you've got to know how that person deals with it. And then are you going to change some people? Because there's some people dealing with failure wrong. I mean, I could fail and all of a sudden, you know, be happy. You know, does that mean, you know, that's good?
It depends. And again, I know you keep giving me a lot of specific questions. I tend to give you vague answers, but that's like, I just can't give you, here it is for everybody. It just doesn't work.
There's no cookie cutter. Yeah.
But so like what your example is right there, how do you deal with failure? Well, ideally, you want to learn from it. You want to get better from it. And then you want to forget about it as quickly as possible. Okay. Some guys can fail and they're okay with it, but they haven't learned anything. That's probably not good. They haven't gained any information from the failure. Other guys get so emotional that they spend all the time trying to get the emotion back, and then it's time to hit again, and they still never learned. Okay. So, you know, it's some balance, it's some middle ground. You know, there are some really good players that destroy bat racks after they make an out.
Yeah.
You know, but again, that works for them, and they get it out of their system, and they get back up on the top step of the dugout, and they start cheering on their teammates. And, you know, in general, you know, a little bit of an emotional reaction is probably a good thing because it helps get it out of the system to some extent. Okay. But, you know, if you ever, you know, you've seen the video of, oh Christ, I forget the name now, but you know, coaching that emotional reaction out of players is probably not a good thing. You know, when they don't do their job, they should be a little pissed. Okay. When they fail or they get beaten or whatever, it should hurt. The challenge and the question is how quickly can they get through that and then get ready for the next pitch, you know? And so in the game of baseball, and we talk about this all the time, it's every 15 seconds there's another pitch coming, which is another opportunity, which means I got to get ready and get back to it every 15 seconds because baseball games are won and lost on 3 or 4 pitches. And you have to be ready to compete for each one because at the end of the day, you don't know which one's going to determine your fate, you know, but it might be that 0-0 pitch that you take because you think it's a ball, the umpire calls it a strike, and now your wheel starts spinning, and the next pitch comes, it's a fastball right down the middle, and you can't swing because you're still caught up in the last pitch. That might decide a baseball game right there. You know, the one pitch you had a chance to do something with, you took it. And so now you're in an 0-2 count, and it all started with your inability to process that emotion in those 15 seconds. So, you know, I think like everybody, I'm guessing everybody on this call probably watched Jordan in The Last Dance.
Oh yeah.
And you certainly, that was so revealing, okay, of Jordan as a competitor. My concern is that you're going to start having people trying to copy it. You can certainly learn from it, but that's he's an outlier. And, you know, but when you look at what it took for him to get himself ready to go compete at that level every night and what he was willing to do for himself and his teammates, you know, and obviously the line, you know, winning has a price. He paid that price. And if you're not willing to pay that price, you're probably not going to get what Jordan got. But you also have to have that burning, red hot flame inside of your belly like Jordan did. And most people just don't. And I don't know how you create that.
You know, and he also said, many times he's said it, it's been quoted, you know, that the reason was as good as he is that he failed a lot and he took a lot of chances.
Yep. And it's, you know, it's a great quote and it's true. And people, you know, for him, we've all heard of a story about getting cut from his high school team and what that did for him, which was really an interesting story because most people don't understand that Kobe Bryant also went through a season when he was 12 years old. He didn't score a point. And, you know, his dad was a big basketball player and Kobe went through the season where he didn't score and was going to quit to play soccer when he read the story about Jordan getting cut. And so that Jordan being cut thing actually fueled Michael Jordan. It also really impacted Kobe Bryant when he was 12 years old, which I think is just fascinating. But, you know, Jordan obviously played with a ton of emotion. He was very vindictive. It was about settling scores. Hall of Fame speech, you know, it rubbed people the wrong way, but that was Jordan being Jordan.
Sure.
And, you know, it certainly, when you get to that level of elite performance, there's going to be some things behind it that you really don't want to see. And that's just the reality of it. You know, there's that line, you know, the performance is always better than the performer. And what it takes to be at that level, almost always, and there's some exceptions, but there's some dark side to it. You know, there's some baggage that comes along with it, and you know, being great has a price.
You know, let's take some questions. This is a good time. Greg Byron. Greg's from Saskatoon, runs a great program up there. He says, is there anything you guys do with the Mariners that you can speak to or anything you've done in the past to help understand their why? I know there's a big word, why.
Yeah. And, you know, Simon Sinek, start with why.
Yep. Simon Sinek,
Great book, great TED Talk. But we talk about it all the time. And, you know, the first thing you try to do is it gives the player safety that whatever his why is, it's okay. There is no bad why. There's no good why. It's your why, whatever it is, and it's you being authentic, you know? And so if you have a player say, hey, my why is to make $100 million in the game. Okay, that's your why. I'm not going to judge you for it, but that's important information for me to understand. Okay. Then you talk to the next, hey, my why is I just want to play professional baseball for as long as I can and be able to say I was a professional athlete. Okay. Other guys, I want to see how good I can be. I want to get in the box. I want to play in a World Series. So there is no bad why. It's just understanding the why and then helping the player understand his why and the benefits and consequences of that why. Okay. So again, the challenge is most of the time we get into judging people for their why. And I don't think that's okay, because again, we if you go back to what we said earlier, we just want people to be themselves. We want people to compete out of their true self. And so I can't look at you and say, that's a bad why. But I can help you understand it and help you understand how your why is going to help you and how your why may hurt you at times so that you can understand what comes along with it.
And you guys obviously have a lot of players coming from all parts of the world. So you've got to know different players. Now, your coaches, do they get reports? Like as soon as you sign a player, your scouts have reports on how they handle things, the mental side of it and all that. And that's given to your coaches. How does that work?
Yeah. So, our initial player plan begins with the scout who signed them and the information that we're able to gather. And just like you said, there's very different realities. I mean, you're signing, Latin players at 16, 17 years old. You're signing American college players after their fourth year of college and everything in between, international players, American players out of high school. And so certainly, like, let's say you sign a player out of the SEC. He's played 3 or 4 years at Vanderbilt or LSU. Okay. You're probably going to have a better understanding of that player because your scout has likely seen him in both high school and now through a very high level of competition. Okay. As opposed to a high school player who you've never seen play day in and day out against really good competition, as opposed to a very young international player. So it's all a challenge. Steve Kerr was talking about this wonderfully the other night about, when you draft a high school basketball player and bring him to the NBA, you're really rolling the dice because there's so much information you just don't know, as opposed to drafting the guy who played at North Carolina or played at Duke for 3 years. So, it starts with the information we get from our scouts. And then we keep a very detailed log of all of our players and kind of what makes them tick and who they are and how they're evolving and how they're growing. And this is another important piece, is that human beings are always growing. They're always maturing. They're always changing. They're always different. They're always having different life experiences that are impacting their whys. And you kind of have to keep up with that too. And in general, baseball players, certainly in professional baseball, go through a lot of stages of one, trying to get to the big leagues, okay, trying to stick in the big leagues, trying to get paid, okay, trying to win. And players generally morph through a lot of different those phases multiple times.
Sure.
And sometimes you're in both of them, you're in multiples at the same time, but the gray matter is tricky. And if you believe that it's that important, you have to pay a lot of attention and understand that people are always evolving. And the player you signed out of high school at 18 is not going to be the same player who's in AAA knocking on the big league door at 22.
And you mentioned that, the complete package of the mental game, I mean, it obviously encompasses, sleeping, good sleeping habits, nutrition, training, weightlifting. There's a lot of things in there. So you're also saying that we can do all those, but if we don't take care of the mental game, all that stuff's going to break down.
Correct. But it's also, and I'm glad you brought it up, because all of those pieces work off of each other. And so, for example, I can be as tough as I can be as tough as nails, right? I can focus as well as anybody. But if I have a bad swing, I'm going to pay the price for it. Okay. I might have a great swing and I might be really tough, but I might be physically weak. I got a problem. Okay? I might be strong. I might have really good stuff as a pitcher. I might be tough, but if I didn't sleep and I'm not hydrated, I'm going to have problems too. So you've got all these pieces of the puzzle that have to come together, and a chink in any of them can really derail you. And they kind of domino off each other. And so, like, if you just go back, Abraham Maslow, who had a huge impact on me as a psychologist, and his hierarchy of needs, like, you can take the toughest person alive, and when they get hungry, they're not as tough. They're incredibly distracted by a physiological need, you know, and that's real. And so you're really holistically trying to develop the athlete and cover all of the bases, because any chink in the armor is likely going to reveal itself during competition.
You know, it's interesting, and I hate to jump to this, but it just popped in my head. I'm a big Joe Rogan fan. You know, I know you've I've seen it on your Twitter. Today he had a fighter on. I can't remember the name for the life of me. And he was talking about that as far as eating, before he even trains, he doesn't eat that much. And even when he competes, and the reason he doesn't eat that much is because he believes that the tiger that's not as hungry is going to be meaner than the one that ate way too much.
And it's a great point. And I was managing up in the Northwoods League in La Crosse, Wisconsin, a while back. Greg Vaughn was my hitting coach, and Greg used to talk about it all the time. I want to be hungry. Literally, I want to be hungry, because that gives me a little bit of an edge. It gives me a chip on my shoulder, you know. And most of your really good athletes have little tricks. And again, that's why there is no, I can argue both sides of that all day long.
Yeah.
That's stupid. You need to be hydrated. You need to have enough calories. You need to have enough protein to get through it. Sure. Okay. But then you've got somebody who's, you know, performing at the highest level saying that's not how I work, because what I sacrifice in terms of physiology, I gain in terms of a chip on my shoulder, which fuels my focus. And so there's so many little tricks that people play, and, you know, they're probably unique to them. No different than Michael Jordan inventing reasons to be angry at the opponent, even if they didn't give him any reasons. And, you know,
figured one
they
out.
showed that clip of him reading newspapers. Could you imagine Jordan playing the day with the internet and Twitter and being able to fuel himself?
That's all he would need.
Reasons.
That's all he needs is the Twitter.
Just get on Twitter and get yourself in a mentally charged place to go out and compete. So.
You know, this would be another good time. And I know we're going to jump a little when we take the questions. You know, and I had one in the top of my head, but then I'll think about it here in a minute.
You lost focus.
Yeah, I did. Richard Kanya, you know, Czech Republic, another very good coach. He goes, and he's getting specific. How do you deal with a pitcher who's doing great until 2 strikes? You see a lot. You get 2 strikes, and all of a sudden now they can't stay focused and find the strike zone. How do you deal with that? I'm sure it's not just in pitching, but in other aspects.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. And it, you know, it makes no sense, right? Because the pitcher, you get the hitter to 2 strikes and you think this thing's over. And unfortunately, that's what happens. You get the hitter to 2 strikes and you kind of think the job is done. And, you know, the word finish is really important. You know, great athletes finish whatever it is they're doing. And they understand the at-bat is not over with 2 strikes. They still have to make another pitch. But there's kind of 2 things that happen, or I would say kind of 3 things that happen with pitchers. Number one, they get into this perfect pitching mentality where they think I have to make a perfect pitch. And anytime you're feeling like it's got to be perfect, you're in trouble, because perfect is not attainable. And so I feel like I got to make this perfect pitch because there's 2 strikes. I got to make this thing right on the perfect corner, and ball 1, ball 2, and I go from an 0-2 count to a 2-2 count. And that perfect pitching just never works. And you get into that idea of primal pitching, which is that anger, that primal. And I'm going to throw this thing as hard as I can, or I'm going to make this ball move more than I have to make it move. And that those emotions start interfering with your delivery. So now your mechanics get out of whack, you know. And then you've got pointless. So you got primal, and you got perfect, and you got pointless. Just that way too casual. Hey, I've got this thing, and I make a poorly focused pitch, and I get hit in that 2 strike count. And and that's why it's good for pitchers to really try to eliminate the count as much as possible and just focus on really trying to execute a pitch to the best of their ability. But, 2 strikes can be a challenge for pitchers. 2 outs can be a challenge for pitchers, because you think about it, the pitcher's out on the mound and he gets 2 outs and everyone in the dugout's yelling at him like, hey, 1 more out, get us in here. And they forget about, they still got to make a pitch. And they go from thinking pitch to pitch to thinking out to out. And baseball is about pitches. And you have to be able to refocus and recommit every 15 seconds so that you can attack this next pitch like it's got a life of its own. So
I'm going to get to Joe Perono's question. I'm just going to get right to the spot. Are you suggesting the coach sit down with the player to both understand the player's motivations, focus, and confidence?
Absolutely. And understanding, again, confidence is gold. Confidence is directly related to focus. And where does this player get his confidence from? Okay. Is this a player that needs you to feed him confidence constantly? Okay. Not ideal, but if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. Some players get their confidence straight from preparation, which is really preferred, but some guys really work hard and they don't take any confidence out of it. Some guys get it from conversation. Some guys get it from confrontation, so you do need to understand each player. And that doesn't mean that it's fixed. It means that it can evolve. It means that you can help guide them to places. But it all starts with that self-awareness and you helping that player understand who he is and how he can best compete out of his authentic self. And knowing that, not everybody has to throw 100 miles an hour. That's okay. You can do it throwing 90 miles an hour. Okay. Not everybody has to be a Max Scherzer looking like he's going to rip your head off of each pitch. Okay. That certainly works for Max. It may not work for the next guy. And oftentimes you also have to understand the role the player has. If you're a 1-inning reliever, coming in and creating a mindset for 20 pitches, 15 pitches is totally different than I got to do this for 110 pitches tonight. And so you want to create something that you can actually stick to and repeat. And so you do have to understand it. And then you also have to be able to nudge them in certain directions sometimes. And ultimately, like when it comes to confidence, for example, you really want to teach and you want to educate people that, confidence should come from preparation. But you'd be surprised at how few players actually connect those dots. And so you're constantly kind of pushing them and then helping them understand that, look, you're driving too much of your confidence, say, on a phone call from your dad. Okay. And that's a tricky subject to maneuver through. But if you've got a professional athlete whose confidence is hinging on approval from a parent, which, by the way, is very real.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now this player's ability to perform is lost or is being controlled by a parent at home. That's not a real comfortable place to be in as an organization. And so you got to work through those very difficult conversations. And it doesn't matter whether the kid's 14 or 15 playing travel baseball or playing in the big leagues. We spend probably more time than people would think helping players communicate with their parents and their spouses and their friends. How can you help me perform better? Okay. And when I come off the field and I grab my cell phone and after every game, I've got 6 messages. How did it go? Oh, tough break. That's all the strikeouts. You got to minimize that. You got to educate those people that, look, I don't need the text message. It doesn't help me. I'm trying to be one of the best in the world at what I do. Okay? And therefore, I value our friendship. I value you being in my family, but I do need to set some limits around my career and my job because, like I said, I'm a shortstop I'm trying to be one of the 30 best shortstops in the world. And so I need to control what's coming into my life a little bit more. And those are hard conversations.
You know, I love that you brought the parents up, and I'll tell you why, because, you know, and I've been a big believer, you know, I've changed my thinking also, but that players, parents, and coaches are a three-pronged system where they got to be on the same page as much as possible. We've got a lot of high school coaches, college, but we also have guys all over the world that are coaching at different levels, and parents, obviously, that's an issue. So to them, you know, I love what you said. So to the parent, you sit them down all together and have this conversation.
Well, it's not just parents, it's the whole support network. And, you know,
Boy,
again,
that could be, wait, that could be the garage guy that, you know, changes your tire. It could, because everybody's always giving you advice, right?
And again, depending upon the player, everybody. And I mean, I tell you, if you want to be great, one of the biggest skills you can gain is telling people no. And, you know, that well-intentioned advice can really be harmful. And so part of our job is to understand the support system, meaning what's the messaging he's getting from mom? What's the messaging he's getting from dad? What's the messaging he's getting from the agent? What's the messaging we're getting from the college coach who used to coach him? What's the messaging that he's getting from his private hitting instructor that he might have? And because my voice is one of many, but my voice can carry more impact as a director of player development if I understand the other voices in the circle. And again, not so much right or wrong, just understanding it. And the more you can get guys on the same page. So to answer your question specifically, yes, we do talk to parents, we do talk with agents, we do talk with college coaches, because if the college coach is calling him 3 times a week to talk about his swing, we need to know what they're talking about. Because if they're coming at him this way, we're coming at him this way, it's not good for the player. And so you do have to learn the support system. You know, Tom Izzo taught me that, and I don't know Tom Izzo, but just reading his stuff and talking about, you really don't recruit the player, you recruit the support system. And in college basketball, you better be recruiting the AAU coach, and you got to know those voices that are going in there as well.
You know, I was thinking, wow. I mean, think about nowadays with the internet, with social media, all the things they're reading, even when it comes to training, you know, your coaches are telling you one thing, you're reading another, just to filter through that. I mean, the mental game's so much more important now than it's ever been then.
Ever, because you're 100% right. There's, you know, I'm looking at my iPad. I've got my phone right here, and I'm seconds away from being able to get information that I could have never gotten my hands on 20 years ago. And like when you think about this, and Coach Shula just passed away, but you know, the Dolphins were known for so many years when Don was the coach, like it was a completely closed environment. Nobody was allowed in that Miami Dolphin locker room because he wanted that way, because he wanted control of the messaging. And you think about this, up until, you know, whatever year it was, I don't know, mid-90s, Dan Wilson, for example, Dan Wilson, longtime Mariner catcher, was telling me the story. When he was playing baseball, when he left home, he didn't have a phone. And so when he got in his car and left, he was totally secluded from the outside world. And when he went into the old Kingdom, nobody could reach him. Now, every player has this sitting in their locker, and you know, they get done eating at lunch, they sit down, and now they're getting inundated with people from the outside world. They go out and take batting practices, come in, they got 6 more messages to respond to. And so that ability to stay focused on the job is so different than it's ever been. So not only just, and we talked about information, if my curveball is not good, guess what? What happened to my curveball? Put it on my phone, and it's everywhere. And so, like you said, how do I filter through that information? And how do I know what's relevant? How do I know what's right? How do I know what can actually help? It is a big challenge. And, you know, in a perfect world, you would like players to have the discipline to, you one, put their phones away,
Mhm.
at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But our world just doesn't operate like that anymore. And for good reasons in some ways, I mean, if you have a family and you've got young kids, it'd be nice that your wife can let you know that your son has an earache. But understand that for 100 years, the game was played and the dad didn't know his son was home with an earache. Now he's out trying to be one of the best in the world and he knows what's going on. It's just different. And it requires that we coach differently and that we message differently and we take all of these things into account differently.
Love it. Love it. And you talked about the analytics. When you take those and you max them because now it helps you understand that you're doing something right or wrong and correct it. Then you put it with the mental game. Boy, now you've got some great stuff happening. What do you do with your coaches in the system? Are there certain things that they, I know everybody's an individual, but are there certain things, a guideline where, players show up, that a routine that coaches have that they, kind of understand the player before the game or in practice?
Yeah. And, we take a lot of pride in our coaching development and our continuing education programs. And, we're trying to continually equip all of our staff members. But yeah, so again, you hit it on the head. The sweet spot that you're trying to get to is you're trying to create an identity for your organization. You're trying to create an identity for, and someone once told me, like, when the Mariner team bus pulls up to the stadium, what's the other team thinking? Who are they? What are they all about? But at the same time, you're trying to create these guidelines and these boundaries that help create identity, but also allow for freedom in between. And so we have a hitting philosophy, and we've got a lot of different hitting coaches. And different coaches have different strengths. They have different personalities. And that's a good thing because, players need a variety and they need different voices at times. And not every player is going to connect to every coach. And so you're trying to create curriculum that has substance and meat to it, but also allows for an incredible amount of individualization. And our coaches have been really good about that. And so our coaches are good with our players. I try to do the same thing with our coaches, meaning I need them to be themselves. And we've got older coaches who, Darren Brown manages in AAA for us. He's managed in the big leagues. Dave Berg manages in AA for us. He played 7 years in the big leagues as somebody who signed for $5,000. Denny Hawking manages for us. He played, I believe, 14 years in the big leagues in the 50th round draft pick. Eric Ferris managed for us. He got one major league hit. We got plenty of people who didn't play professionally. And so there's a real variety of different experiences and styles, all trying to work within the same boundaries.
It comes to mind, I'm thinking about, I don't know why, but I'm thinking about Tommy Lasorda, talk about a guy with the mental part. I mean, every coach that I've worked with, every time I've asked the players, what they like about the coach, and, and that was more than anything is that they motivated them. They didn't talk about the X's and O's as much. They talk about, they love playing for them. They'd run through a wall for them. If Andy McKay's picking coaches, doing interviews, what type of coach, what's the characteristics of a coach you're looking for? Maybe we got some people online that are looking for jobs.
That's interesting because I spent my life studying coaches. I was, unfortunately, I was not a great player. I was not even a good player. But now in hindsight, that allowed me to get a really big head start on what I do now and what I've been able to make a living on. And, I've grown to respect, there's so many different types of coaching. I can remember teaching a class in college back when Harbaugh was with the 49ers and Pete Carroll up in Seattle, and they had that great rivalry going. And you would watch the sidelines, and they were just completely different people. You had Harbaugh that was just in a rage, screaming at everybody, and his teams were great. And then you would pan across the other side, and you had Pete Carroll, just the biggest smile on his face, working away on his gum, just throwing love on everybody. And they're going toe to toe, going to overtime with two totally different styles, and so there's a lot of different ways to be an effective coach. And it starts with being who you are and being consistent with it. And, coaching, especially at the professional level, it's hard. And it's really dependent upon the talent base you have. If you go back, like right now, is Belichick the greatest football coach of all time? We can make that argument. Okay. But he certainly wasn't the greatest football coach of all time when he was in Cleveland getting fired. And, when you think about Nick Saban and Bill Belichick coaching in Cleveland together and not being good, that's pretty revealing. It says a lot, But I think right now, again, my personal lean, and this is what I believe, and I can tell you that it's not the only way to be successful, but I would definitely lean towards a mental skills based coach who understands basic human psychology, who understands culture, who understands leadership, who understands performance psychology. And when you look at like a Steve Kerr, you look at a Greg Popovich, you look at a Pete Carroll, for example. And there's a lot of them out there right now. That would be my lean. I think you can still coach as kind of an authoritarian type of, being the king of the castle. There's places for that. I would like my castle to be about the best collaboration in the world between a bunch of different departments. And so like in baseball right now, I think your best coaches are the coaches who can really understand your scouting department. They can really understand your player development department. They really understand roster building and payroll management. They understand data and analysts, and they can harness it all together to create a program and a curriculum to help the player be his best. And there's just too many smart people right now that are willing to help to think that you can do this on your own. And so I think the best coaches are your best collaborators. They're the people who can bring, and the analogy that we use, it's kind of like it's the pit crew of a NASCAR race. That whole crew comes in and they come in fast and they come in hot, but they're all working differently, but they're all doing their thing. And so if I'm an athlete right now, for me to be my best, just start going down the list. You need, we'll stick with a pitcher. You need a pitching coach. You need a mental skills coach. You need a strength coach. You need a trainer. You probably need a massage therapist. I think I said nutritionist. You need a data analyst. Okay. Well, there's 7 right there. And those 7 people need to be working together and not working against each other. So they have to understand it's a team concept to coaching.
And a high school coach or a youth coach or a travel coach, even a college coach, possibly, depending on what college, he or she has to understand all those things because they don't have all 7 people to help them. Here's the question I guess I want to ask.
And I'll interrupt you because I'll give you a great point.
Go ahead.
That's probably been the key secret to whatever success I've had is that I was at a small junior college. And so I was all of those people.
Yeah.
And so you knew how to tape an ankle. Probably shouldn't have been, but you knew how to tape an ankle. You know how to create a strength and conditioning program. You knew how to be the mental skills coach. You knew how to coach every position on the field. Yeah, I had to, because you were kind of a one-man show at times, and I was not a one-man. I had great assistant coaches, but those smaller schools, those high school coaches, they learn all the different disciplines, and that is a very valuable skill.
Interesting you say that because you see the game changing also in that aspect, and that is you've seen a lot of college coaches now in professional baseball, a lot of other type of coaches with many different skills that are being hired by professional baseball. But I did want to ask you this, and you could add to that also. As a player, I played for many coaches, And the guy that yelled at me all the time, or the guy that, you know, I know kiddingly said things that he meant well, but I didn't know he meant well. I didn't like playing for those guys. Did I have to change, or does the coach need to change?
Well, it depends. And what I have learned from this, and I've coached my whole life, there's been players that I have not impacted as much as I would have liked. And those are the ones that keep you awake at night.
Yeah.
Okay. And, I could line up hundreds of people that would tell you I was the best coach they ever played for. Okay? And I could also line up some people that, would not say that and would say a lot of other things. And I think that's true of any coach. To be honest, it's true of any leader. If someone once told me, if you want to know how well of a job you're doing leading, just count the number of knives in your back. And I think there's some truth to that.
Yes.
Because you do have to take a stand, and you do have to draw a line in the sand at times, and you do have to hold people accountable. But as a coach, for me, you better adapt to your players. And again, baseball is different. NFL is different. Guaranteed contracts change things. And, if you're working in baseball and your general manager signs a player to a 2-year, $20 million contract, and you're the manager, well, you better find out how to make this work. Because if you don't, the player's not going to play well. He's not going to like the environment. And now your general manager, your boss, just made a bad sign. So these things they're very hard. They're tricky. But your best coaches are going to be the guys that can allow for all these different personalities to be themselves and to coexist together. And they're just like you explained, you didn't like being yelled at. I don't think there's many people who do.
Right.
But I do know that it can be an effective coaching strategy. You can teach and motivate and inspire all you want, but holding their feet to the fire works sometimes. And you better have a very large toolbox with a lot of different tools, because there's that old saying, if the only tool you have is a hammer, the only thing you can work with is a nail. And you need different hammers, you need different screwdrivers, you need pliers, you need all of it, because you're going to have 25 different people who have 25 different sets of needs, and that's your job to figure them out more than it's their job to figure you out. Now, that's professional sports. Okay? I do think there's a time and place for, the youth league coach, the high school coach, to be a little bit more like, this is what we're doing, and this is my program. And if you don't like it, then you can go play on the other 18U team. I think there's room for all of it. But the higher up you go, you better become a master at, because just think about it, if you're a college coach, many colleges aren't going to let you take away scholarships. So when you recruit a player, you got him for 4 years. And if he's not able to adjust to you, you better be able to adjust to them, or you're just burning a scholarship.
Let's take a question from Joe Perona again. This goes directly to something. Do you have a simple reminder to players on the field, in game, to allow players to release from a slump, a mindset, to get them back into being confident in a live moment? So when they fail, during the ball game, especially.
Again, yeah, you've got a lot of them for different players, but what I will tell you, kind of in a general statement, anything that gets the player focused and committed to something external. Okay. What do I mean by that? That they're more focused on something outside of their body and their head. So if I'm a hitter, it's the baseball. I need, and this is kind of a hallmark truth of performance. When people aren't performing well, they're generally focused internally. They're thinking about their thoughts. They're chasing distractions. And they're worried about how their body's moving. They're worried about how they look. Okay? When they're playing really well, they're focused on something external. A ball, a spot on the fence, a glove to throw to, a base to run to, okay? A rim to shoot a basket towards. If I'm shooting the basketball well, I see the rim and that's it. When I'm shooting it poorly, I'm generally thinking about how my body's moving. If I'm hitting a golf ball well, I'm seeing a ball flight and I'm trying to create it. If I'm swinging the golf club poorly, I'm thinking about how my body moves. So anything that gets the player focused and committed to something external would be kind of that quick rallying cry that we would try to stick to. And our players are very, very much trained to be external during that moment of competition.
You know, I know you've said many times, you know, and I use the term also, challenge the status quo, always ask why. What's Andy's system? How do you sit down and look at certain areas and say, okay, we're doing it this way. Why are we doing it? What, is there a better way? What's your system that you use?
Absolutely. And so, you know, it starts with, you can't improve what you're doing until you really know what you're already doing. Sounds silly, but it's the truth. You have to put on paper what your current program really is. Not what you want it to be, but what it really is. Okay? So now you're defining your current process. Once you define it, now you can figure out how to improve it. And so for me specifically, it starts with a lot of reading, because I'm constantly trying to find ways to do what we're already doing better. It goes to a lot of podcasts. It goes to a lot of webinars. It goes to a lot of clinics. It goes to a lot of professional development activities. But really, and this is one of the benefits of being in professional sports, it's just watching your players. And you start seeing what is working better than the other things that we're doing. And so your improvement is just as much about elimination as it is about adding. Okay. And so you watch what players are bringing to you. You watching the rest of the industry. I mean, the quickest way to get your attention is to have your opponent kick your ass doing something for you to go, okay, you'll learn really quickly. You know, and most things in sports, by the way, are created out of necessity. You know, they're created out of you know, Bill Walsh creating a spread West Coast offense because he didn't have a quarterback who could throw. And so, okay, we don't really have the ability to go downfield. So what are we going to do? Just lose? No, we're going to create an offense that allows us to throw these quick, short, 5, 6, 7, 8-yard passes kind of in front of the next layer of the defense and spread them out. And the only, you know, why did players start going in motion in football? You know, you watch the NBA right now. There was one team that kind of figured it out. You got to shoot 3-pointers and you got to dunk the basketball. And that's where games are won and lost. And those mid-range jumpers kind of went away. Well, they were successful. So now you see the whole league transitioning that way. You see the NFL where positions are literally starting to disappear because it's becoming such a pass-oriented game, you know, and it's cyclical. I'm sure these things will come back too, but you just watch and you watch what other people are doing. You watch how teams are, how they're utilizing their bullpens. You study the greatness that's around you. And this is really important. This might be as important as anything. We're so competitive that we tend to not like our competitors. And that's a big mistake. You got to love your competitors. You got to love them and you got to learn from them because they will teach you more than anybody. And so we're the Seattle Mariners. I'm going to watch the Houston Astros. How are they managing their bullpen? They're doing something unique here. They're doing something different. Watch the Tampa Bay Rays, how they're managing their pitching staff. Learn something from them. You know, watch the Dodgers and player development with what they're doing. I mean, I work with the smartest baseball people in the world. Most of them I'm competing against. So while I'm also competing and I'm trying to beat them, I also can learn and see what they're doing and apply it, whether it's in the scouting area or how they're allocating their resources, who they're hiring, how they're aligning their staffs. And it doesn't mean you copy, it means you study. And then you critically think about what are they doing here and are they getting results out of it? And analytics are huge for this. So you have the ability, and college coaches can certainly do this because everything's on the internet. Just start looking year in, year out and say, like, wow, who are the teams that say don't walk people? Okay, what do they have in common? Probably some recruiting, number one. They're bringing people into the system who already don't walk people.
Right.
But what is it about this college program? Man, you can't get these guys out with 2 strikes. They don't strike out. And study it and watch it, because that's the beauty of what we do. It all reveals itself in real time right in front of our faces. Watch their hitters with 2 strikes. What are they doing? And numbers, the data can really lead you towards places to go study, because there's places that are constantly doing it really well.
And a great example, one of your great friends is online, Jerry Weinstein, one of the greatest learners of all times, and one of the best coaches of all times, no doubt. Again, a great example, just listening and learning. And I go back, I'm thinking to myself as I started the podcast and the Zooms, and all I do now is watch somebody else all the time. I watch all these different people with the Zooms and the podcast. Why? I'm trying to learn about baseball, but I'm also trying to learn how to be a better interviewer or better, podcaster, call it. What have you done lately? Go ahead, jump in.
That's really good, because like I do the same thing where, I've actually worked with one of our media personalities in Seattle about how do you interview people? How do you create your follow-up questions? What were you trying to get at with that question? Because all you're trying to do is just dig deep with the person. And so learning how to ask better questions is a great skill. And so where do you go? Well, go to the people that do it for a living. And so I think that's critical. And then I believe you're going into another question. You're going to ask me what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, well, and folks, just so you know, we got about 5 to 8 more minutes left. If you got any questions, type them at the bottom. I was going to ask you lately, what have you changed? What have you learned that you've changed in how you do things in teaching?
Well, the biggest thing that I'm learning right now that I'm focused on and I'm hyper-focused on is actually slowing down the learning and mastering what I've already have. Okay? Because again, you have to think about this. When I started coaching, there was no information, right? There was the ABCA convention, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't many books.
Now it's crazy.
It's everywhere. And so now in my career, you've gone from starving for information to now drowning in information. And how do I take it all and harness it into our program and simplify it into usable formats? Because you just can't keep layering it upon layering it upon layering it up on top of each other. And so you do have to be a master simplifier in today's game. And so while you want to continue learning and seeking out opportunities, you just can't keep bringing it in because you're just going to drown in all of it. And so learning how to filter and how to simplify is a really critical skill.
I'll tell you what, this whole show, you just made the whole show. I mean, it was fantastic, first of all, but slow down your learning and master what you have. I'm going to take that advice because I'm way too much on the internet trying to learn way too much. And that's a great point. I do want to let's take a question.
Except for your podcast. Keep watching your podcast.
Yeah. Well, that's, interesting you say that, because that's the hardest thing I've ever had to do when I first started a podcast. I still do it. And it's even worse on Zoom. And that is go back and listen to all my shows. Because,
isn't that painful?
Not only the voice, but what you ask and how you ask it. And sometimes the words I screw up, but again, how are you going to get any better?
And that's true. And if you are a coach, filming your team meetings, and it's so painful. I mean, I taught for 20 years in a classroom and had to get reviewed every year. And oh my gosh, but it's how you get better. And watching your interview, like right now, I can promise you, I won't watch this because it's not comfortable for me. I'll make myself watch some things once in a while, but you really have to challenge yourself to sit down. And if you're being interviewed, because interviewing is a really important skill to learn how to message and sell your program when you do have a chance to talk to somebody, and you don't want to waste the opportunity. So as much as you can record yourself and get feedback, and getting feedback from your coaches or your players, that feedback loop is really important, because it is the only way that you get better. And I know Scott Service will record his opening day meetings and go back and watch them, and it's a really important tool.
Are your coaches recorded, when they're running a practice sometimes, to see how they
Sometimes,
communicate
yeah.
with the players?
Sometimes they are, and we have our player plan meetings that are all recorded.
Wow.
And again, because you can go back and you just watch, and why did I ask that question right there? Why didn't I? He's begging me to ask about this. I just kind of blew right past it, or I certainly didn't pick up on his body language right there. Or so, yeah. There's, like I said, the perfect presentation's never been given. The perfect interview has never been given. You just got to keep moving forward.
John Branton from the beautiful Vancouver Island. This is more of an MLB question. With the upcoming MLB draft only being limited to 5 rounds, is there organizational philosophy for the draft eligible players not taken in the draft? Focus on makeup, mental, physical, regional, since money is offered in all the same. I think I understand part of that.
Yeah, I think all of those things come into play.
Yeah.
Regional, not so much, but it starts with tools. It starts with ability, and you have to find a tool package that gives you reason to believe these tools can become major league skills over time. And then you dig in. I'll be doing this afternoon. I'm making some phone calls with some of our prospects, amateur players, and switching shoes. I'll be doing the interviewing. I'll be asking the questions. So it all comes into play, and we know it's such an inexact science, and we know that you're going to make more mistakes than you're going to hit on. And when you look at just like the NFL draft, they're drafting a pool of players that are playing at a very high level, and they miss all the time. We're drafting high school players, trying to think that they can become big leaguers. You're going to miss more. We're drafting younger international players.
Mm-hmm.
So it's talent prediction is really hard. Whether you're the Navy, you're trying to put together a class of Navy SEALs, or you're trying to predict elections, it's really difficult, because again, you're dealing with human beings. So we focus more on our process and making sure that we get our process right and that we execute our process, rather than did the player end up playing well or not? Because again, there's just too many, the number of first round players who don't get to the big leagues or don't really impact the big leagues, that list is a very long list. It didn't mean that the team did a bad job. It just means it didn't work.
That's a great point. Is there a correlation between the mental side of the game? Like Billy Beane talked about in his book, obviously most of his was mental, it seemed like. These guys that are high draft picks or, for sure picks, is it the mental side mostly that fails them?
Yeah, well, because the tools are the tools.
Yeah.
So, why does his 95-mile-an-hour fastball with the same characteristics as this guy can't get out an A-ball, and this guy's dominating the major leagues? So you can identify tools really easily. It's not hard. Running speed, bat speed, power, all these things. And especially if you're talking about a college player out of a college environment. But again, and think about this, like, what would the NFL look like if NFL players had to go through 6 levels of minor league football to get to the NFL? Not all those people would be able to get through that.
Absolutely.
That grind. And so it's such an inexact science. I think some people are better at it than others, but anybody that would tell you that luck is not a major factor, because trying to identify mental skills, and here's the difference. I can call a great college coach, any of them. I can call Tim Corbin at Vanderbilt. I can call John Savage at UCLA. I can call Fred Corral at Missouri. He's a dear friend of mine. And I can ask him about mental skills of an athlete. Okay. but we're asking about this person's makeup in this environment. When you switch the environment, there's no guarantee that those skills are going to follow, right?
Right.
So when I'm the Friday night pitcher and I've had a ton of success, it doesn't necessarily mean that competence and my ability to focus is going to transfer into a 5-day rotation with no guarantees of what's going to happen. I mean, it's totally different. And that's why, trying to predict the mental skills are really hard, because I know that because I ask these questions all the time, and really smart people get it wrong. This is the toughest kid you'll ever coach. He's the hardest player, the most coachable player I have ever coached. And then you get him and you're like, this is not my experience.
Wow.
And why? It's a different environment. And so those things are challenging. And again, let's say you're talking about a first round draft, like a high school player. Okay. Do you have kids?
Stepdaughter, yes.
Okay. Well, forget the kids. I'll ask you specifically. If I evaluated you right now, as you sit here today, and let's just say I got it right, which is a big if, and then I gave you a check for $5 million, is there a chance you're going to be a little bit different tomorrow?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And you're a grown man. What do you think it does to an 18-year-old?
Well, yeah.
Now, it can do really good things, and it can do harmful things. It can do things in between. You don't know. But again, and then you go through this process of, what happens when a player gets to the major leagues, and you're talking about the travel, you're talking about the airplanes, the hotels, all of the distractions, the money. Is that going to change a 21-year-old? It likely will. It doesn't mean it's going to change it for the bad. It can change it for the good too, but it's going to have an impact.
But that's why you guys also in professional baseball do a lot of homework, it seems like, on, their parents, understanding how they grew up, because a lot of that, is how they grew up. Sometimes, they know how to handle things a little bit better, even though they get to the big leagues or even to professional baseball. It's a different, like you said, atmosphere for them.
Yeah. And again, it's information, but it all can mean different things. I mean, is growing up in poverty a bad thing? Certainly a lot of people have played their way out of poverty. It's been a positive for elite performance. But does that mean that rich kids from the suburbs can't be good? No, it doesn't mean that at all. Stanford has a lot of really good baseball players come out of Stanford.
Yeah, I'd say so.
And so, is being an oldest child good? Can be. Can it be bad? Sure. Being a youngest child, parents being divorced, parents staying together. All of these things are factors, but they can all have different impacts. And again, I think it's one of the beauties of the game is that you're never going to figure this thing out. You're going to keep trying, but it's kind of an unsolvable question. And you have to have that humility of knowing that I'm going to keep trying. We're going to get some right. We're going to get some wrong. We're going to continue to get better. But it's just kind of a hidden, unsolvable part of what we do. And I think it makes the game great in some ways. I mean, minor league baseball in the draft would be boring if all the first round picks went right to the big leagues and were stars.
Yeah.
And you got to have room. Like, we have a great story going on with the Mariners right now. 3 years in a row, our 23rd round pick became really an impactful player. One is in the big leagues for us right now. One's about to be in the big leagues right now. And the other one's knocking on the door. So those are 23rd round picks. It's an awesome story. And that's another beautiful thing about professional baseball, is it allows those things to happen. So
Steve Foster from the Colorado Rockies pitching coach sends a message. He says he listens every time McKay speaks. So he loves it.
Fosty's my boy. We were together in Colorado.
That's right. You came from
Is he on the show right now?
He's on Facebook Live. Yeah, he's on Facebook. He's not on Zoom. And so is Jerry, another Colorado guy. Jerry Weinstein's another Colorado.
My college coach.
Yeah, that's right. It's Sacramento. Absolutely. Wow.
It's good to be amongst friends.
Yeah, it is.
Let
me see.
Any tough questions.
Let's see. Well, I tell you what, somebody's that's been getting their money's worth, and not that anybody's paying for this, but Joe Perona, another question. We're going to end it with this, Andy, because you've been great. I know you got a lot of stuff to do. You got big staff to handle and a lot of things to get ready for. Perona says, expectation in players, mind is performance. How do you address them? I mean, a lot of these you've addressed, but I think if you want to add to that.
I don't quite understand. Are you talking about?
Oh, I'm sorry. It says, no, that's my fault. Expectations in players' mind is a performance killer. Expectations in a player's mind is a performance killer. How do you address them?
It can be yes and no. So, some people have really high expectations for themselves. Sometimes we put high expectations on a player and they play up to them. That can be really great. And this is where it's an art of where do you set these expectations, where do you set these goals so that they're actually challenging enough to push the player out of their comfort zone, but they're not too high that they just crush the player and leave them completely frustrated all the time. And so there's a sweet spot. But, if you really want to get into this a little bit, and again, you gave me a tricky question here to end this thing on, because I could go all day on this. But ideally, you want to get to the point where there's this expectation for the pitch. Okay? That my expectations aren't about 10 years from now or 5 years from now. It's about this pitch in this moment in this rep. That I have an expectation for how well I can execute this pitch. And that's it. I don't get any bigger than that. I have an expectation for how well I can stretch during this 10-minute stretching program. I have an expectation for how good this training session in the batting cage can be for this pitch and this particular drill and this rep, respecting the rep, whatever it is, one pitch at a time. That don't let your expectations get too far beyond that. But again, it's understanding the person. And, we have a very talented player in our system right now who's completely driven by being a Hall of Fame player. And it's genuine. It's how he feels. And his expectations for himself is to give us a Hall of Fame at bat every time he walks up to home plate to create a Hall of Fame career. And that would completely implode somebody else. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you, in our top handful of, how the industry views our farm system, our top handful of prospects all have very different expectation values that they set on themselves, and they all work. One of our other top guys, his expectation is to have as much fun as he possibly can have when he comes to the baseball field. So while having fun, he's also driving baseballs all over the place. Great. The other guy, no, fun for me is winning. Fun for me is getting to the big leagues. Okay, that's great too. So again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is really understanding the individual and knowing that they're all driven by different things. And as a coach, I have to put my own agenda a little bit to the side and know that what I want for the player may not be what he wants for the player. And what drives me may not be what drives them. And I've learned that. That used to really irritate me. Playing for money used to really bug me. Now I understand it. Players have very short careers. The game is getting younger. Most players never get to free agency.
Sure.
And so, and what do you do with life after baseball? So now I have a much different appreciation for the financial part of it. And I'm really way okay with it now. I probably wasn't 10 years ago. So those things have all, I've evolved on all of those things. And mostly because I've been able to sit in their shoes or sit in their seat, wear their shoes a little bit and walk their walk a little bit. And that's helped me understand their perspective a lot better, which ultimately allows me to help them a little bit better. And, so going back to the expectations, if someone tells me they want to be a Hall of Famer, I'm going to say great. And then I'm going to hold them accountable to a Hall of Fame level of preparation, a Hall of Fame level of everything. If you want to be a Hall of Famer, then guess what? You got to work like a Hall of Famer. You have to compete like a Hall of Famer. You have to behave like a Hall of Famer. If you just want to be a Major League All-Star, that's a different standard. We can reduce the standard. If you just want to play in the big leagues, that's okay too. Because what I do know is if somebody just wants to get to the big leagues, me trying to push a higher level of expectation on them probably is not going to do a whole lot. Now I'm just creating conflict.
But you as the coach, in some ways also on the flip side, you have to help them understand some of those expectations, because my expectations could be pretty high and I'm not ready for that.
Well, what I have to do is I have to help them understand what it's going to take to meet their expectations. That's where the gap usually comes. Yes, you want this, but you don't understand it's going to take this.
So
when they close that gap.
Right. So when they see all these things that you give them, that might change their expectation.
Correct. And oftentimes, and I'll give you, like, going back to data, okay? I can now sit with a player at our lowest level of the minor leagues and show them TrackMan data, which is, are you familiar with TrackMan?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay. And I can show them that, look, what's coming out of your hand is incredibly similar to what's coming out of the hand of these 7 big league starters.
Yeah.
So what's the difference? Well, it's usually pitch usage. The difference is he'll throw his changeup to left-handers, you won't. Your changeup is the exact same, but you only throw it to right-handers. He'll throw it left on left. Okay. What's the difference? Every time he falls behind, he's gonna throw breaking balls. He's gonna throw changeups. He's gonna throw fastballs. You only throw fastballs. The stuff is the same. Your confidence in using them in different situations to different hitters on different sides of the plate, that's what's changing. And so you can also create those expectations through the use of data and evidence. And I pride myself on being an evidence-based coach, because it tells a story. I think I've said this probably on every podcast. If you want to be a really good coach right now, you got to be able to tell a great story with data. You got to be able to capture their mind, capture their heart, but then give them evidence that this isn't Andy McKay's opinion. Anson Durant, who's a soccer coach at North Carolina, present the information, present the data, present the evidence. Then you team up with the player, the coach and the player team up to beat the data, to overcome the data together. The data is not the end of the story, but it is the truth. And people would much rather have truth and evidence than my opinion.
Absolutely. Love it. And then you take all that and now you've got to apply it into practice, into games eventually, because then you got to see it work.
Because the data is able to give us the right questions that we have to train. The data is able to tell us what wins Major League Baseball games, okay, and what gets players to the big leagues. Mm-hmm. So it's giving us the test. So now we teach to the test. And I've used this example plenty of times. When I sit down with a player in A-ball and I point out all the strengths and then show him his strikeout rate, or more importantly, show him his swing and miss rate at pitches in the strike zone.
Yeah.
And I say, listen, there's never been a player since TrackMan data has been kept who has swung and missed at pitches in the strike zone the way you do and played in the big leagues. Wow.
That opens it up.
That opens it up. Now let's go to work. Let's fix this thing. Okay. And the data can tell such a great story. It still takes critical thinking.
Sure.
It still takes the ability to, and that's where wisdom and experience comes into play. Not all data is equal, and not Einstein, not everything that can be counted counts. Okay. And not everything that can't be counted doesn't count. But it takes some experience. It takes some wisdom to be able to separate those things, because you don't want to be chasing the wrong data. You don't want to be getting you really good at things that don't make you a better player and don't make your industry value as a player go up. That's really a waste of time.
You there, Andy?
Uh-oh. Are you frozen?
Yeah, you're good now. Go ahead and finish.
I've got you still.
You got it?
Yep.
Okay. I'll tell you what, you've been more than generous with your time.
Yeah. I don't know where I got cut off.
I'm not sure either, but it's pretty close, I think. It was pretty close to what you were just ending, it sounded like. But if you want to go ahead, elaborate on that.
I was talking about the idea that through analytics and evidence and data, it's a lot clearer now how you win a Major League Baseball game. And
right.
No shit, you score more runs than the other team. I get that. But there's a lot that goes into it. And so we're now able to have a clear idea of the stats that really matter, that impact wins and losses, versus the stats that really aren't correlating all that strongly to wins and losses. Also, on an individual scale of what's getting guys to the big leagues and allowing them to stick. And so we're able to create a curriculum that's driven towards those things more. Okay. And evidence is allowing us to do that.
Mm-hmm.
The worst thing you can do is get really good at things that don't matter. And at the expense of the things that do matter. And we're getting closer to understanding a little better what really matters. Now, I would also say, I think it's going to continue to evolve. And you've got to stay on top of that. Because what's really critical I mean, obviously we're in an era right now of high velocity, high strikeouts, hitting home runs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's what it is. If you tell a pitcher that velocity doesn't matter right now, it's a mistake.
You've lost his
Because
credibility.
it does.
Yeah, you lost
It's
your
the
credibility.
number one predictor of success in professional baseball right now.
Yeah.
Now, will it be 5 years from now or 10? I don't know, but I know it is right now. You know, and hitting the ball over the fence is really important. Now, will the game evolve and get more into maybe moving runners, stolen bases become a little bit more important than they are right now as the rules changes occur? You know, if they ban the shift, for example,
Right.
that's going to impact the game. An automatic strike zone is going to impact the game. You know, and again, not good or bad, just you better be on top of it and you better understand the game that you're playing and how you can best win it.
You know, having runners on base and hitting home runs might be better.
But and it's funny because all this new school stuff, you know, and it's when I talked earlier about the knives in my back, the knives are usually about, you know, being progressive. And I just learned it's all about messaging.
Yeah.
So instead of talking about launch angle and hitting the ball in the air, just hold up Ted Williams' Science of Hitting book and say, all we're doing is what Ted Williams was begging everybody to do 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And now I can be old school. I can brand myself and be old school. And guess what? Earl Weaver talked about walking and hitting 3-run home runs, you know, all through the 70s. So we're really trying to be Earl Weaver and Ted Williams. And, you know, people have thrown weighted baseballs for a very long time.
Yep.
People have pitched up in the zone for a very long time. So all about the messaging and how you want to brand yourself.
You know, it's interesting also, and then I'm going to let you end on a final note here. You've been more than generous, boy. I really appreciate it. You know, it's interesting. You see, I've talked to several young people who are in professional baseball now that have different ideas, thinking outside the box, you know, you use more analytics and all that. And a lot of them have done very well. But I've also talked to a couple that have not made it and quit because probably their approach on how they presented it or how they, you know, set it all up was probably, you know, incorrect. And, you know, because some people wouldn't listen, I guess is what I'm saying. Because you might have some old school coaches that are saying, no, I don't want to listen to that. And then it becomes, you know, a lot of turmoil.
And you're right in that. So again, what skills are needed? Your ability to communicate, your ability to message, your ability to connect.
Mm-hmm.
And again, just what I just said. What if I sat down with a group of veteran coaches and held up the Ted Williams hitting book and said, this is going to become our Bible, as opposed to, you know, here's my Excel spreadsheet and we're going to get launch angle.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same thing. And
but Ted Williams is going to work.
Well, with a different crowd. And that's, again, you better know your audience.
Yeah.
You better know who you're talking to. And again, you know, some things are fun. And I'll give you one piece of evidence here. You know, hitting the baseball on the ground is something that, again, if you're hitting it like 100 miles an hour, you're probably okay for the most part. But ground balls they're just not good. And when we did some research, and that's one of the great things about having analysts, you know, I can just send them projects. You know, take all of the super fast you know, baseball players that we all grew up with, you know, the hit it on the ground and run type of guys. Nobody's been a good hitter on the ground in the history of the game, ever. And up until about 5 years ago, I would have debated that with my entire heart.
Sure.
Okay. Nobody has ever been a good baseball player hitting the ball on the ground consistently. You know, their damage is done with line drives and, you know, some version of a line drive. So I would not have understood that years ago until I saw the evidence put in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would have never understood the value of a high strike ever, even though I had many pitchers in college that I coached who lived on a high strike, and they kept striking people out, and I kept yelling at them to get the ball down.
Yes, we all did.
We all did.
Yep.
We didn't know any better, and now we do know better. So again, we learn, we evolve, and the issue is that you have to keep evolving, and that's where Jerry Weinstein has been such an incredible mentor to me.
Absolutely.
Is that it never stops. It's where Brent Strom has been so great, because what you need right now and what the world baseball is starving for is wisdom and experience coupled with current relevant knowledge. And there's not a lot of it out there. You've got a ton of relevant knowledge, but not the wisdom or the experience or the ability to communicate it and present it. That's everywhere in the game. And you also have a lot of the older school, I'm not going there. That's not really productive either. And so right now, if you're a veteran coach and you've got the wisdom and the experience that comes along with reps of coaching, and you can couple it with staying current, I like to call it staying relevant, you've really got something, because those people are not growing on trees. I can tell you, because that's my job, is to find those people, and it's hard to find both right now.
I'll tell you what, I was going to ask you to end it with something to add with the coaches, but I think that's a perfect ending. Great advice to coaches, Andy. This is awesome, man. I want to thank you so much. Again, I'm looking at the time way over what it's supposed to be, and it's just because you could tell the passion you have for what you do, and I appreciate helping our coaches in the U.S. and around the world today.
I appreciate everything that you do. You do a tremendous job, and there's so many people involved in our game in different ways that they're passionate about the game. They grow the game, and so I absolutely appreciate what you do, and I'm honored to take part of it, and really glad you had me on.
Thank you very much, Andy. Andy McKay, again, Seattle Mariners, Director of Player Development. Thank you to Andy. Thank you to Brian Crock, our producer with the Lineup Media Group. Thank you especially to all our listeners in the U.S. and around the world on Zoom, Facebook, and on Twitter. Can't thank you enough. Listen, Wednesday, 6 o'clock Central Time, 6 p.m. Central Time, Jim Lefebvre, former manager of 3-4 clubs. You don't want to miss Jim Lefebvre. I can tell you this. I worked with him a lot. He will come out of that computer and grab you with excitement. So don't miss Wednesday. Jim Lefebvre, former Major League player, again, Rookie of the Year, and also hitting coach. He's done it all in professional baseball. He's going to be a great show. So thanks, everybody, for listening. God bless you. Hopefully everybody's getting well, getting ready to be back on the field soon. I'm Pete Caliendo. I'm your host of Baseball Outside the Box, the show that loves to interview baseball's best coaching minds who love to challenge the status quo. And we definitely had one today, Andy McKay, who loves to challenge the status quo. I learned so much. Some of the coaches online said I took so many notes, I don't have enough paper. So sayonara, everybody. God bless you, and see you on Wednesday show at 6 p.m.